Hello. That's it, there's the only slide. Actually, no, the other one's goodbye. I am Mark Kelleher, and my job is that, which means I make stuff, help people make stuff, the sort of stuff you've been hearing about that you're selling and bundling and stuff like that.
And my name is Carlotta Merzari. I'm the creative director at Northforma Entertainment, which is a creative studio that produces original fiction content aimed at Generation Z on the topics of the environment and sustainable living. So we're very grateful to be here today and show to you what the results of our research has been on generations. Some might ask what the value is today of dividing generations based on birth date and when they were born and the way they behave. Nobody likes labeling, of course, but everyone yet knows what a millennial is like, how they behave. Everyone knows what Generation X or baby boomers like or dislike, and that is still very relevant in marketing terms and as well in the way we program our new content and our new TV programs. And our research was specifically on what the drivers and factors are that help us define what's important for the new young generations that's coming along, defined as Generation Z.
There's only one slide that's the name of a BBC television programme. It's this one. You're all in there somewhere probably, unless you're outside. It's not the bottom one. You'll see Generation Z, which we'll be talking about in a minute. Those people, it's 2019 now, so they're 23 years old. So imagine that. Just remember, unless you're under that age, remember being 23 years old. That is the world we are going to create for you this afternoon. There is another one at the bottom, which is 4-year-olds. We're not going to talk about them. That's called the Alpha generation. We'll come back in 15 years and talk to you about them and what they are doing. Millennials are Generation Y.
Yes. The oldest ones now are 37, 38 years old. Yeah. The first ones.
They're old. 23 to 39, I think it works out as a millennial. So you think they're the future? They're the past.
So regardless of birth date, there are key needs that all this generation shares in the definition of what they value being a valuable lifestyle and a valuable experience, even when it comes to entertainment. These needs across all generations we define being identity, belonging, value, status, aspiration, and achievement. They are consistent throughout all these 3 generations, but what is very interesting is that they change significantly generation by generation, and we'll see what that means specifically for each one of them.
Let's talk about Generation X and about the sort of content. And when we're going through these, we'll take you through those 3 generations, thinking about, in this case, what's the sort of content they would like, what sort of stuff engages them, what's the sort of structure of their world, what's the sort of perception, the way they see things, and therefore when they're on their phone or on their TV or whatever they're doing, and they're just about to consume content, the sort of stuff that will attract them, and the fact that you can make some sort of assumption about people based on those 3 lumps in time. Generation X is really about validation, and a lot of if you think about advertising for Generation X people, so 20 years ago, advertising was very much about seeing families, family with a father and a mother and 2 children and a dog having gravy or something like that. And people watching that, Generation X people watching that would have gone, I can relate to that because there's my family, I will go out and buy gravy. That's a piece of content which is engaging with the idea of validation. So they are seeing content, it reflects back to them their already existing lifestyle, and therefore they go, that's for me. You will see later on how other generations don't do that necessarily. It was all about top-down. Now, there's a person you may have heard of called David Attenborough. David Attenborough is a natural history programme maker. He's been making programmes for the BBC since, I think, about 1955, something like that. He's still going. He's now 93. We're wheeling him out again in about 3 weeks' time for a whole thing about the environment. And he started being one of what I call the white coat men. They were all men, they were all older than most people watching the TV, they probably went to Cambridge and they told you what was the truth. And the way that Generation X see content is they want not only validation, but they want to know the truth from people who are wise. And white coat syndrome is something that Generation X have, which is if a doctor says, you're going to be fine, you're fine. And if they say, you're unwell, then you're unwell. It's all about things validating your status in life. That generation is all about conformity. They weren't rebellion, even though they're sort of in the 1960s. You think miniskirts and the pill and rock music and stuff was about rebellion. It was really rebellion within the square that they were allowed to be rebellious in. They were very much about conformity. And their world, whether it be work, jobs, houses, cars, etc., was all about gradually working your way up a staircase so that by the time you got to your pension, you had the biggest house in the road or you went on the best holidays. And that is how that generation saw themselves. That's how the sort of content which engaged with them validated all of those things that they saw in their own lives.
Generation Y, aka millennials, everyone knows who they are. There's been tons of definitions applied to them: lazy, entitled. I'm sure that everyone is familiar with all of these definitions. Me, of course, being one of them, all I can say is that we're incredibly cool. But what is very important about them is that with the internet aggressively coming into their households, the structure of top-down that Mark had just explained actually tipped upside down. We like to define them as the bottom-up generation, merely because from a personal, professional, and also consuming and entertainment point of view, even when it comes to purchasing habits and the way they want to experience their life on a day-to-day basis, opportunity for them is the key. The internet came into their house. They started recognizing that now they could choose things. It was not only a matter of receiving and consuming whatever was given to them. They had the ability to choose. They had the ability to create their own truth and their own reality. They didn't need anyone telling them what truth is or what reality is. They could go and explore for themselves. This for them has been incredibly significant across all sectors in their lives, especially the professional one. Thanks to the internet now, they can literally build businesses from scratch, from nothing. Personalities like Zoella or PewDiePie, who have built media empires literally from their bedrooms. That became the standard for millennials and has hugely changed the way that they interacted with entertainment as well. I remember when Netflix first came around, I was in New York, and it was literally DVDs coming through the post. And that, to us as an experience, it was literally understanding how the personalization of entertainment and consumerism actually was incredibly valuable, and we now know what that has led to. So that was super powerful. It was a super powerful change for that society. Generation Z, instead, these are the new kids coming along. They're meant to be 31% in the UK only in a few years. So it's a big number of people coming along. We define them as the growth or synthesis generation because in a sense they embody the best of both worlds. They absolutely believe in the value of big institutions and structured corporations, but at the same time they extremely value their individuality. They have seen what works in the millennial generation, so they've seen that they can create anything from scratch and they can do pretty much anything that they can, but at the same time they need for a validation in the real world and not just the online world to be present as well. This is particularly relevant for marketers and brands that now have to put a lot more effort in communicating their new products. It's not just the online experience, but it's very much the real life experience too, and that translates into growth of experiential advertising being a huge business right now.
Finished?
Yes.
Two of the things that we use to measure in a sort of grand axis scale about how people behave are two things. One is about technology and one's about social drivers. And these are the technology drivers for Generation Z. What tends to happen is a lot of people's perception, expectations, requirements, needs, propensity to be engaged by a piece of content are formed in those years between about 16 and about 24. Some people, of course, it's a bit like old teddy boys. If those know what a teddy boy is, teddy boys were all the rage. They used to fight on the beaches in the 1950s, and you would see the odd one or two groups of teddy boys still in their 90s, still with their drape coats. So some people do not change their behaviour. Most people do go on to change their behaviour. So this is talking about how Generation Z will be behaving in the next decade, probably. We don't know what Generation Z will be like when they're 65. We'll come back and do a presentation then, because we'll all be alive. Here's the technology drivers. What are the things that turn them on that, again, will make things engaging for them? Artificial intelligence used to be called big data. I don't even remember that. It was rebranded by somebody, the artificial intelligence organisation, but this is not robots, although let's guess that all the dramas are going to have robots in them. If you haven't seen Humans, which I shouldn't advertise, it's a Channel 4 programme, which was on your chart earlier. It's a great programme. It envisages about 2022 or 2025, and robots have taken over. This is not really about this. The actual way that artificial intelligence will manifest, of course, we all have got it on our phones already. It's the Google algorithm. It's about machines. I always think it shouldn't really be called artificial intelligence. It should be called very quick stupidity, because each decision is very, very simple. It's just they can do it, but the machines can do it very, very quickly. This is something which is cool for Generation Z. So it's something that if you're thinking about content and engaging content and about the way you position your services, etc., where you're targeting Generation Z, where you think that there's a drop-off in the age profile of your service, then this is something which you could think about positioning and using as a thing that will engage them. Virtual reality, of course, the gaming world of gaming, headsets, immersive technology, is all about virtual reality today. Hasn't really taken off outside the gaming world. One of the have you ever done it? The disadvantage is you can't really move because when you move, if we all had headsets, imagine that we all had headsets on now, and that we were actually in Bolivia and you were all spread all over the world in your bedrooms, and we're not really here, but it's a virtual world. That might be possible in a future conference. The trouble is, as I move, I'm moving in the real world as well as the bit of software, and that is the problem. Whereas we come on to in a minute augmented reality, that's different. Virtual reality, so that's the limitation. So in the idea of a future office environment, great, but you actually have to have a physical space to move around in. That's the disadvantage. For Generation Z, it's cool. It's something which certainly you can use in promotional content and in long and short form content. They love it. Augmented reality, the difference being that's a totally fictional world. This is the overlay of stuff on the real world. So a bit like Google Maps, Google Glass, which sort of died, was Google's version of this. It's if you use Google Maps on your phone, you can walk along and it'll say there's a chip shop on the right-hand side, and there's that place you visited 3 years ago. That's augmented reality. Has lots of applications. There is work that you can do around content that uses that sort of thing to enhance your service above and beyond the basic fundamental. Blockchain.
Blockchain.
Carlotta wants to talk about this.
This is incredibly interesting and exciting for us, actually, because it's kind of a word that people look at with a bit of suspicion. Nobody quite knows yet how to use it in all of the sectors that we used to. But what is very key for Generation Z is that it responds to a very important psychological need that they have, which is the element of trust. So Generation Z has displayed a growing sense of mistrust for centralized organizations, especially in the fields of finance, politics, healthcare, and investment, and data protection as well. So for them, thanks to the opinion of entrepreneurs, investors, and engineers alike, cryptocurrencies are seen as a very good thing, and the acquisition of blockchain in all sectors that they're knowledgeable with is seen as inevitable. So it's still quite interesting and exciting to see how this can be applied in the communication sector. Mostly it's an answer to funding and investment right now, but it'd be interesting to see how it evolves in the future.
So the other driver that we talked about, the other axis for Generation Z, and you had them whenever you, between 18 and 24, whenever you were that age, you had similar social drivers, whether it be the miniskirt, or whether the minicar, or whether it be mobile phones and the internet for the millennial generation. And these are the things which Generation Z are experiencing and will influence their propensity to like things and propensity to choose your content versus someone else's.
Environmental sustainability is a huge topic for Generation Z. It's mostly because for them it's seen as something that they have to pay for without being responsible one bit. So as a topic of communication, and also in the workplace, in any way they interact in real life, they will want organizations to be proactive and to be communicative about environmental solutions. It's not something that they, kind of thinking about favoring in any way. For them, it's absolutely important that they talk about it between themselves. So they have the ability of being incredibly connected and incredibly knowledgeable about different devices and different platforms. They have the ability to organize between themselves very physical, present in the real world manifestations and events. So it's something that is absolutely crucial for this generation. Of course, another one that is critical is non-negotiable equality. For them, is absolutely non-negotiable. Let's remember that this generation is the most diverse that the world has ever seen. So for them, it's completely natural. It's not something that is negotiable. It's equal pay, equal opportunities. In terms of content as well, they will require and expect to see diverse stories in the programs they consume. So that's absolutely key. One thing that is very interesting about Generation Z is that even though they're completely knowledgeable about technology and they're absolutely adamant about data security, they're actually quite happy about sharing their personal data because they're incredibly aware of the advantage and benefits that brings them. Of course, the adamant thing that they absolutely require is security, and that's something that, again, brings us back to blockchain and how essential it is for them.
That is Apple trying to get in and find out ideas about programming. Yes. That drilling, if you heard it.
Trusted sources is, again, one of Gen X's biggest strengths. These guys were born with the internet. They never knew a day without the internet. They have minimum 4 to 5 more devices available to them every single day. So they have the absolute ability of dissecting any piece of information that is given to them. They'll have the opportunity to just find where the information comes from, whether that's relevant in different contexts as well. Of course, the search engine is something that they can use with their eyes closed. So that's something that is very important to know from a content creation point of view.
And that idea that when you are thinking about services for content, and this is very applicable, is that I think we all try and think when we're imagining our services about our consumers being only consuming our stuff. What the thing about Generation Z very much is about that they source things from multiple places, so that you are all two things. One, therefore, you're always competing with other services, and we saw all that map of those big brands earlier. All of those are happening at the same time, not just in the marketplace, but very often multiple services are being subscribed to by one individual. And the other thing is that there's an opportunity with Generation Z to be present in more than one place. So if you think, oh, I do SVOD, it's fine, then I'll just make cool content about robots and they'll come and watch. One of the things that we would recommend is thinking about the wide range of services. So, you've got an SVOD service. What about your short form service? What about your online streaming service? Because they will be there. And if they can see you and your brand in those multiple places, it will reinforce their idea that you are a trusted source. And once they do trust you, then they do tend to be loyal. These are the 4 pillars of successful engagement with Generation Z, which takes to the information that we've talked about there. You're first, aren't you?
It's driver, witness, the narrative, which sounds extremely philosophical, but actually it's got very practical implementations. This is mostly interesting for brands and marketing when it comes to communicating the benefits and the value of a service. Everything for Generation Z has to be contextualized in a valid social environment. What that means merely is that if you're at the forefront of that communication, you're either the one driving it, so bringing it on for the first time, or you're the loudest one or the most relevant one communicating it, or you're absolutely aware of it and you're referring back to it. So we define it as witnessing it, but you're definitely referring back to it.
They want to be involved. One of the things about them is that since they've been probably 10, 11, the first time their parents are willing to give them some sort of device that's connected to the electronic world, is that they have been in the electronic world. They've wanted to be involved. They know that they can find an answer to any question from Google. If you imagine your life and the first time you did a Google search or something like that, and then you look back, I can remember doing this, and then look back thinking all those times that when I wanted to research something, the name of somebody or the definition, what is an amulet, and how difficult it was, they've had none of that experience in their life. So it's all about them being involved. They've always known the facts that they wanted to know, just like that. So to involve them in your service, and there's something here about not just delivering them stuff in a one way, but going back to that thing about being present on multiple places for them, something about a two-way thing. They want to be involved. And in fact, if they're not involved, then they'll just go somewhere else.
Another interesting thing about involvement is that it sort of opens an opportunity to explore the value of user-generated content, which is growing exponentially right now. It's still to be placed in a sort of business model, but it's growing massively. Tell your own truth refers to authenticity of message. Again, as we said, these guys are incredibly good at dissecting information and finding the true sources, and as well, they'll absolutely understand whether a message that's, say, communicated online doesn't actually have an equal and valid representation offline. So authenticity is a key word for anyone of that generation listening to you.
This is the last slide, apart from that one. The new technology, they love it. Embrace it, be on it, get your content on it, and be present on it with a two-way dialogue, and they'll love you for it. Thank you. That's us.
Thank you.